Many people spend their lives chasing success. And they only, when they get to what they think is success, they realize that they've sacrificed the very things that are the most important in life. So today I'm going to share the podcast with John Chappelear. He's going to talk to us about how to get off that gerbil wheel of success. I can't wait to hear about this. And he's going to talk to us about how to live your life with more purpose and more connection and more joy. And y'all know I'm all about the connections and the joy. So, John is a multi award winning author. He's a consultant, a speaker. He's got over 45 years of experience as an executive and entrepreneur. He has lots of different programs where he helps individuals reduce their stress, hello, and organizations become more positive and more productive. That's great. And now John has written a book. I've known about his book for many years. It's called The Daily Six, and been a worldwide success for individuals and organizations that do want to become more productive and more positive. And who doesn't want to be more productive and positive, really? So I will tell you that he's a house of authors. His wife has just had a book published. I'm not sure. Is it YA or just Skylar Brown and the Moonstone Medallions? And it's to help kids deal with the trials and tribulations of middle school. Yikes. Don't miss those days. So, welcome to our podcast, Success Through Connections. Glad to have you, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Zella. It's wonderful to be here and good to see you again.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
It's been
but
a minute.
It's
It's been
been
a
a minute.
minute. I think I had a little bit of hair left the last time I saw you, but no, probably not.
That's okay. I don't pay attention to those things at all. But I do want to dive right into our conversation
Sure.
because one of the things that really struck me right off, which is when I was reading your bio and you described yourself as a recovering big shot. I love that phrase and it instantly drives curiosity. So, would you explain to us what you meant by that?
Sure. I guess it's just your priorities. I mean, when I was becoming a big shot, everything was secondary to success. Money, power, position, business, growth, you know, but the other things that were just not as important, like family, peace of mind, less stress, was much more important to have my name out here than it was to have my kids think, oh, dad might show up tonight to the soccer game. They knew I wasn't coming. They didn't even worry about it anymore. It wasn't until I actually had a few sort of test failures, I guess, along the way, the smaller failures before you actually get absolutely crushed and you change your mindset, is that those things don't wait for you to get ready and have time for them. I mean, a 4-year-old girl, if you wait 10 years to come back and pay attention, isn't a 4-year-old girl anymore. She's a
Right.
14-year-old girl and just as soon skip seeing dad because now all I'm going to do is embarrass her anyway. So, it's reprioritization of the things that really are important that make our lives valuable. And, money is certainly a wonderful thing to have, but not in lieu of personal emotional connections with people that you love and who love you, or just personal emotional connections, period. I was just having a conversation today with somebody who I said, what I'm trying to do right now, especially in the age of AI, is I'm trying to get people to realize that an intellectual connection is never going to be as powerful as an emotional connection. So let's open up our hearts a little bit more and let it lead a little bit better into building a better community. And that's what a recovering big shot would think about. A big shot would think about, well, how much are our sales going to go up? If I do that, how much will my sales go up? If I do that, how much more profitability will we get? Because if the answer is, well, if the profits really won't go up, then it's just like, well, then I'm not going to do that. I'm not, it's too much more work for me to deal with that stuff. So it's sometimes you can do it. I've had lots of clients over the years who decide that's a much better idea. Let me work on that. I've had lots of other clients go, hey, everything's working along great. I'm just going to leave it alone until I get more time. And you know as well as I do that you never get more, you
Time.
never get any more
Yeah.
time. There's always something comes up.
It's interesting the different I guess it's generational. I know, like, when I grew up, dad went to work, you saw him when he came home for work, and by then it's time for bed. it wasn't until we were much older that we got to spend time with our father, but that was as adults. But as children, they didn't come to the soccer games and to the baseball games and all. They
Right.
didn't do that. Now the generation, they're all into that. Well, most of them work remotely anyway.
That's right. Well, that's true. That is true.
So,
It certainly was. It's funny, Tom Papa, who's a comedian that I know very well, has got a line about, when your father came home, nowadays they wanna have a lot of challenges with your father, and when his father came home, his mother ran around the house going, "Your father's home. Your father's home. Be quiet. Be
uh,
quiet. Your
oh,
father's home." And, it's like, I think that was kinda my generation because 'cause I'm older than you are, so it was just, the dad went out and worked, and the mom stayed home and took care of the house. And I can tell you for a fact that did not make for a particularly happy family.
mm,
I mean, it was the family I lived in, I've always referred to in in keynotes, I say, "Well, it's not like I grew up in the Nelson family." I grew up more in the Adams family, and it was just it was really not a pleasant experience. Your dad would come home, he'd be angry and frustrated from a whole day at work, and my mother would be, lonely and segregated from the rest of society because we lived out in the suburbs and there wasn't any suburbs around in those days. And so she was lonely and needed attention, and he was tired and needed to rest. And so that wasn't much of a connection there. And the kids are all running around looking for attention and focus. He just wasn't capable of delivering it. So, there wasn't a whole lot of, fathers on his best sitting around the table kind of moments in our lives. It was really sort of scramble for your own happiness, pal. So
so
it,
did that influence you to want to, I mean, at some point while you were on this gerbil wheel of success, going after the,
sure,
the big dream, where was the aha moment where you said, "Wait a minute, I gotta
right.
I need to change the trajectory of where this is headed."
Well, I would love to say I just woke up one day and thought I need to be a better person. And the reality to that is what usually happens with most of us is I call it a gift of devastation. We
Yes.
receive our gifts of devastation. That is a gift you would really prefer not to ever get, except for what usually happens is somewhere down the road, a month, 6 months, a year, you turn around and go, "Oh, no, I'm so happy that happened." And what happened to me was, I've been running and running, being the president of this and the chamber of commerce of that, and the Rotary Club of this, and making sure I was on the front page and everything I did, anonymously found its way to the press. And everything was always quid pro quo, or at least get me a little bit of something that'll help the business grow or help my reputation grow. And it wasn't until what happened that stopped the gerbil wheel simply was a bank walked in one day and said, "We would like all our money back tomorrow, please." And yes, then if we can go into that whole rigmarole, it's one of those kind of things where I wish Russia had come in and said, "We'll give you some money if you just don't tell anybody." But nobody walked in the door and said they would give me some money for this. So, it was basically, I mean, I had a very small, well, not that small. We were doing, I don't know, 50, $60 million a year in sales, and this was in the mid 80s, late 80s. And basically, they had forgotten to fax me a 30-day notice and kind of showed up like middle America gangsters in the parking lot looking for the keys and the assets. And, I had been in business for 12 years. I had about 300 employees. This was the January of 1991, which was a terrible time in a recessionary period. And they just basically put us out of business in about 2 months. And everybody went off to find another job. And it was during that period of time I had been in a program that's very similar over here in Jacksonville, a leadership, but it was Leadership Washington, DC, because I
Mhm.
grew up in Washington, DC. And it was through the Friends in Leadership Washington who sat me down and began to help me think through what had happened and why it had happened and how to begin to maybe consider rebuilding the relationships I had with my family. If I was going to start another business, would I start it back in the same mindset, or was I going to change the mindset in the way in which I started the business, so that if I was going to rebuild my life on a set of principles, maybe it should be maybe it should be a different set of principles than the other one, which was me first and everybody else second. Maybe what I should do is change my focus, which is the name of the company, and maybe put things into the relationships. A mentor years ago told me you want to pay attention to what you're putting into things, not what you're taking out of things. So not what's in it for me, but what's in it from me. And as I began to change that perspective, I started and that's where the Daily Six came from. And started thinking about the things I could put into it every day. Was I willing to try new things?
Was it
find new
mentors
teachers.
that were guiding you to this?
Some were. It was much harder in this was 1991. It was a lot harder to find a coach or a mentor or
Yeah.
somebody like that. Then everybody I had called who had been in business that I was in or had been in that was retired had signed no compete agreements with
Ah,
their former owners. So they weren't going to help at all. So mostly it was a weird combination of one guy who ran a nuclear consulting business, a worldwide nuclear consulting business, an Episcopal priest, and a night watchman in a Cadillac dealership. And those three guys sort of, banged me around enough times to say, it's not all about you. Let's think about how you can, you've got a family here that you've got to maintain and enhance and strengthen, and you haven't done anything to do that. And you haven't done anything to build trust associated with the fact that you say you're going to do this, but your track record shows that you haven't been here at all. So, maybe you need to think about more like, why aren't they giving me a hug when they show up at my house? Well, did you give them a hug first? Probably they need to see the experiences from you before they're ready to behave in different ways. And that this works whether it's an individual or an organization. Leadership needs to act first. The
right.
parent needs to act first. And those were not ideas that came to my head. That wasn't what I learned growing up. I mean, I was the lead dog is the only one that gets a view. So be the lead dog. And the idea was that everything else will fall into place. And that's that gerbil wheel of success. I followed that rule. And then the idea was that, okay, step out of this gerbil wheel you've been running in for 20 years and see how fantastic your life is. And when I jumped out of the gerbil wheel, my life was on fire. My kids couldn't stand me. My wife had divorced me. I was remarried, but my new wife was thinking maybe divorce is not a bad idea.
So what did
And
you do to
listen,
turn it all around?
well, that's it. That was exactly it. It was the concepts behind the Daily Six and talking to those three guys,
Tell me a
uh,
little bit about the Daily Six.
hours and hours.
Tell us a little bit about the Daily Six. It's
Well,
resonated with people all over the world, so
yes,
this is
yeah.
all the inspiration to write it. Tell us a little bit about what are some of those core habits?
Okay. Well, the first concept is willingness. You have to be willing to try new things, find new teachers, learn new lessons without scoffing at things. I was just
That's hard to
trying
do
to
is to find the right help. Believe me.
trust me, I understand that. And so the idea is this growing me in the direction I want? No. Okay, then I'm willing to let go of that and I'm willing to pick up something else. This is very much like the Buddhist concept of non-grasping. It's like if this is not working, I'm just let this go. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to find something else. I
Is
mean,
it
those three
kinda
guys
like
didn't just fall into
hire
my lap.
slow, fire fast? In other words, if something's not working, how much time do you
Yes.
give it before you say, "I'm cutting this off and moving on"? I
Right.
made that mistake one too many times,
Yeah,
taking
I've
too
hired
slow.
and fired thousands of people in my 30 years of actually running companies, and it really is a whole different mindset today for me than it was in those days because I didn't, again, I worked with my dad for a few years at the beginning, thinking, well, this is what you do. You date girl through high school and then you get married. I dated a girl in high school and college and then I got married. But it was just like, that doesn't make any sense if you think about it. It's like, I'm a completely different person now that I'm working and I have to go to work than I was when I was in high school. Completely different person. Why would this work out very well? And it's like if you didn't get really very long, very long, hello, if you didn't get along very well with your parents, why would you think working with one of them would be a great idea?
Be a
A great
terrible
idea.
idea.
So after a few years,
So
I
you
left it
have
when
to
it
be
was just myself.
willing is the first
Had to be willing, painful, not painful, easy or hard. You have to be willing to try a new path. If this isn't something that's really setting you on a path towards makes me feel good at the end of the day, and it makes the people around me feel good at the end of the day, then be willing to look for a different path or a different teacher or whatever it might be. So that's number one. If you're not willing, nothing else happens. So number two is quiet time, some sort of opportunity for you to set your heart and your mind in the right direction. Because I believe if you set your heart and your mind in the right direction, your life will follow. And so it can be anything you want to be. It can be
I set
prayer, it
aside
can be
Fridays for
meditation.
thinking days.
There you go. I've got a good friend of mine who's been going to they're in DC who runs a big, well, I won't get into it, but it's a large nonprofit that helps a lot of inner city DC kids. And every Friday he goes, there's a monastery actually in the city of DC. And he goes every Friday afternoon, has been doing it for 50 years. Every Friday afternoon he goes up there. And I go, well, how did you get off on Friday afternoons? He's like, this is more important than whatever I would be doing. This is more important. And the concept that being in a meditative retreat for half a day once a week would be more important than closing a new deal or adding more sales or was something that was like, what? That you gotta be kidding. I can't believe that would be true. But anything at all, it would be practice mindfulness. Go talk to John Kabat-Zinn. To go, whatever you want to do, that you can settle yourself down a little bit and be quiet
When you
and just
mentioned
see
that,
what comes in. Go
you
ahead.
mentioned that, and it reminds me of something. I don't know where I read it, but it was very recent, actually. It said, when you get your calendar out, instead of, we all schedule all this meeting here, and you got to go see that client. Instead of doing it that way, reverse it. Put down your fun things first, and then
Right.
put your schedule around that. And I thought, well, that's different, but I'm
Yes.
trying it. I'm trying. I just
Good for
started
you.
this
That
week.
sounds
I
like
put a
a friend of mine, Linda Vetris Nichols, and you may have talked to her because she's very big on helping working with women who run their own businesses. And Linda sounds like that's her, not to-do list, but to get to-do list. And so it's like that. And it's true. If you want to, if you're willing to schedule a doctor appointment and a podcast call, then you got to be willing to schedule a little bit of time. Again, willingness. If you're not willing to do these things, then you're not going to change. So we don't get a thing like it's very much like an addictive issue. When you finally hit bottom of living this way, then you are willing to do something differently to live a different way. And if it's not been painful enough, you'll probably slide back into old behavior again.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes people will do it based on just a decision to make that change. But most times it's, I got fired. The nuclear physicist got fired by his own board of directors. It was kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
this Steve Jobs deal where Steve got fired initially, and
Yes.
and he's like, I'm sitting in the Bahamas drinking and drinking a drink and talking to some people and having a great time, and my board of directors called up and said, we're having a meeting and you're fired. It is just like what? And so it comes to these. It's usually a rude awakening. It's kind of like when someone gets fired and they haven't had any input as to how well they're doing on the job, and it's a surprise.
Yeah.
And so number 2 is quiet time. You gotta give yourself a chance to set your mind and your heart in the right
Love
direction.
that.
Number 3 is service to others, being focused on the needs and issues and concerns of other people, not just me. And this is one of those things that when the Daily Six first came out, it was really designed to be an individual change program. And this is the component that really sort of blew it up into an organizational change program, which was changing the focus of leadership from demanding to asking, from telling to asking. That's what I have a whole day on: stop telling, start asking. And, what do you think? Do you think you could do better with this? How would you do it better? If you would, because that means if you're the leader and you think you're still doing it better than anybody you've hired, then you need to go back and check your hiring practices, because that just means you're trying to stay the smartest guy in the room or the smartest woman in the room. And every time you try and do that, all you're going to do is cut your feet out from right from under you.
Yes.
So,
I don't wanna be
it's
the smartest one in the room. I'm the
no,
dumbest. I wanna be the dumb one.
that's the one who's smart enough to have hired the smart people. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, it's people who will challenge you, people that will come together and work with you. I mean, this diversity, equity, and inclusion thing that's sort of being poo-pooed right now. I've done at least 5 videos that say, please don't do that. This is really good. And it's like making a stew for yourself, and the only thing you add to it is salt, and wonder why it tastes so bad. It's like if you put a little, mix up some more spices in there, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to taste a lot better. And it's the same way a strategic plan comes together. It's the same way a family comes together. The kids get dictated to. There's a resentment, whether you hear it or you don't hear it. There's a resentment. Trust me. And somebody's going to hear about it. And this is part of what Susan's book is all about: is that ways to get this out. So service to others doesn't have to be big. It can just be saying hello to somebody or holding an elevator door for somebody. Start small, work your way up. Buy computers for every kid in the school district in a couple of years. Right now, you could just say hi to somebody. And then excuse me, after service is love and forgiveness, practicing two sides. I think of two sides of the same coin. And love to me means understanding the needs of someone else and treating those needs as important as if they were my needs. That's it. And that works whether it's a spouse or a parent or a child or a client or coworker, boss or person who reports to you. If you're thinking of their needs and making sure that they're important to you, not less important to you. And this is an issue, like I do a lot of work with nurses over the years. And the hard part with nurses and teachers is they tend to make other people's needs more important than
Yes.
theirs, you know? And so the thing here is they're the same. You're not less important, but you're definitely not more important. So you're as important. And if you're working in a leadership position, your responsibility really is all the work that gets done is probably going to get done by somebody else. So your
Yeah.
job is to make sure that those people feel as if they're valued enough to work when you're not constantly watching over them and micromanaging them, because that doesn't do much in the way of growth.
So
So
when you
then love and go ahead. I'm sorry,
I
because
was gonna
I
ask
can
you when you
rattle
were
on
talking
this.
no, no, no. When you were talking about leadership in this, I was wondering, in fact, it was one of the questions I had pre-planned for you, and it worked right into it. I thought, well, what separates a positive, productive workplace from
Mm.
the culture that basically drains people?
Emotional intelligence,
Mm,
really.
mm,
Having an
yeah,
emotional connection rather than an intellect. My father had one relationship with his employees, financial. That was it. They gave him time, he gave them money. And that's the same relationship that people had for thousands of years. I'll trade you time for money, trade you time for money. And when they want more money, he just fire them and get somebody who would take less money. So the concepts of how much does the training cost? How much does turnover cost? How much does it take? They'll tell you, can you actually find somebody at this money? Those kinds of concepts. And for a lot of very small business people, they just don't think of that. They don't think
yeah.
of opportunity costs, which means I'll just do it myself.
Oh,
Really? Really? You mean to tell me that at your salary, you're going to go fix that toilet?
no.
How much does that mean the toilet's going to cost to repair? Kind of thing. It's like 10 times what it should cost to repair if you just
And
call
I
a
wouldn't
plumber.
repair it right anyway.
That's exactly right. We'd be jiggling the handle for the next 20 years. You know. So, but I mean, the short answer is an emotional connection will beat an intellectual connection every single time. I mean, I still read statistics that I just finished rewriting an article I wrote years ago to sort of come around to more current terms. And it has to do with the fact that if you're not working on the culture, the people cannot flourish. Stop working and worrying about the people. You got to make sure the right people are in the right spots. No doubt about that. Not trying to fault good to great in any way. But when you have the right people in the right slots, you are going to suck them dry in an intellectually barren culture. There has to be more to it than 9 hours of my time exchanged for this much money. I spend more time at work than I do at home. I need to be able to have more than a simple one-dimensional transaction. And
So what
so
creates great culture in these companies?
what's the
What have you seen that creates a really good culture in these companies?
well, a lot of the companies, some of the companies that I've worked with in the past do things that are very public. They talk about any awards that they've won, and they have a group gathering for that. And they have a celebration for that. And they videotape that. They put it online so that excuse me, the families can hear it, families can see it. They do things that expand and connect the individual outside of the organization. Like, I mean, I can't even tell you how many years ago this was, but I used to talk about send a letter home to the family and thank them for all the time that you're using up from their father or their husband about, we really appreciate it. We know that, sometimes we ask them to stay a little late or this, that, and the other thing. It costs a letter and a piece of paper, an envelope and a stamp, and you will change the commitment level of that person multiple times just by taking a little bit of time to do something like recognize them specifically, not, hey, you're doing a great job, Jim. Thanks a lot for all your hard work. That does nothing. That just kind of rinses right off. But thanks for helping with yesterday with the way that truck came in and you jumped right in there and helped out with that and got us all back on track. Man, that was amazing. That somebody will take home and say, you know what, the boss talked to me today and he said, thanks a lot for helping. You know, I got to get to work early tomorrow, kind of thing. And it's the same way with, I mean, my father was always he always had the wrong grade. Even if you had an A, should have been an A plus. If it was a B, it should have been an A. If it was a C, it should have been an A. It's all, you're always scrambling for acceptance and acknowledgement. And that shouldn't happen in a family. And it certainly shouldn't happen at work. People should be praised frequently and specifically. Again, not generalizations, but specific praise for specific tasks, even if it's, and I can't tell you how many times people have said, but I'm paying them to do that. I'm like, yes.
People
And
who
how's
say
that
that.
working out for you? Well, my turnover is really high. It's like, really? I'm really surprised about that. Really? I'm surprised you can get anybody past the first couple of weeks because they come in and they get this one warm onboarding experience and then they
Yeah.
get thrown into this vat from hell, you know?
It reminds me of when my granddaughter started kindergarten. She was so excited to go to school, all the hype. Then she gets there and realizes what it's all about, and it's every day forever. She's not so happy anymore.
I know. And it's, if you go by and look at teachers, the teachers of the year, or the teachers of the district, or wherever it might be, and you take a look in their classroom, and it does not look like any classroom I was ever in. 'Cause the
Yeah.
classrooms I was in
Yeah.
had 6 rows of chairs, 5 or 6 deep, and that was it. You
Yeah.
go in these teachers of the year, and they got stuff hanging on the walls and
Yes, they
plastered
do.
over here,
Yes, they
and something that the kids do over here, and that's that area for reading is over here. Because now they're engaged emotionally with
Yes.
their environment and their learning experience, and that's exactly the same way work should be.
Yeah.
And it's like pulling teeth sometimes. And I can go by and there's a company right here in town. The guy hired me a year before he sold his business, and he sold the business for $2 million more than he was expecting to sell it for. 1 year of investing in his people, and it was a family business, so it wasn't like he wasn't trying to be connected. He just wasn't doing it. He was pretending to be connected, kind of thing. Well, they all like me. It's like, you pay them. Of course
You
they like
you
you.
pay them to like you.
That's exactly right. So let's go find out what they want to do and what they want to be. And they're probably scared to death that they're going to sell the company and they're all going to lose their jobs. So let's
Yeah.
go figure out how to fix that. And as soon as we started working on the things that, again, love is understanding the needs of others. As soon as we figured out what the needs of the others were, productivity went to the roof. Absenteeism went completely away. Everybody was concerned about making sure this was perfect when it got sold so that the boss got the most return and everybody wanted to keep everybody on when they
Yeah.
absorbed the company. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. The
That's
only
it.
person that didn't have a job day after settlement was the owner. And
Yeah.
that's what he wanted. He wanted to retire. So, so love and forgiveness. Then 5 is gratitude. And that's just to be grateful for all things at all times, regardless of what it is. That's the old one of where the guy says, well, they were taking all the boys for the army, and the farmer said, well, my son broke his leg, so he couldn't go. And he said, well, that's really terrible. He said, no, I got better after a couple of weeks, or they came and took all our horses, but then we learned to use something else. So is it bad news or is it good news? My position is wait and see. Just be grateful and then wait and see what happens. I lost my business. It took me 12 years to build that business. I lost the business. I lost the relationship with people I had worked very hard to get to know over most of those 12 years. Those people have been with me from day one. Well, as we grew. Um, but a year later, I started a new company for the next 12 or 15 years and ran that on this Daily Six principles. And it was very successful, much different business, but it was fine. And it ran until, I don't know, 2023 or four when I sold that business and moved down here and wrote the book and did that stuff. So, and the weird thing is I've been in like 4 countries in Europe, 3 countries in Africa, 4 countries in the Middle East, and every state in the United States except Alaska, and taught this same program. And it hasn't mattered whether it was Saudi Arabia or Salt Lake City. Everybody seems to go, this makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And I still look today, there's a couple of hospitals I did work with, and they're doing exactly the same things that we settled on when I left just before COVID started. And that is find things to celebrate, build your trust with your people. Don't violate your trust. Don't promise things you can't deliver, but when you say you can deliver something, you make sure you can. And it's the same thing for families. I have a program for families in recovery with alcoholism and addiction. And how do you rebuild the trust? Not trying to take over any of the 12-step programs or any of their ancillary programs, but there isn't anything that brings the family and the alcoholic addict back together again to sort of how do you rebuild that trust?
Yeah.
And if you go through the daily 6 of willingness and quiet time and thinking about the needs of others and being grateful that I'm back here and we are trying to work on this. So anything you want to try to do that creates permanent positive change, whether it's addiction issues, whether it's I have a program for first responders where they're trying to not quite as violent a reaction to situations that blow out of proportion. How do you step back from those? I had a woman who became a very good friend who was a retired head of the California Highway Patrol who helped go through the daily six with me and make sure that it was applicable for fire and police and that kind of thing. Because I'm not a fireman, I'm not a policeman. I'm just a guy who thinks he has a good idea on something. But she came back and said, "This is perfect. If you just implement this kind of thing and get people thinking about how to step back from a situation for a minute before they jump in, that'll change first responders in a minute, in a minute." And it's worked very nicely for the people who have accepted it. And then, of course, the last one is action. And that's, if you read a book, it's great, but if you read a book and do something about what you just read, that's where the change comes in. It's not having the knowledge, it's having the behavior change that came from the knowledge that's worth the
Absolutely.
time it's taken you to absorb it? So that's the 6, and I've rattled on, and I apologize for
No,
that.
no, you don't need to.
Um,
That's why you're here to rattle
oh,
on.
okay. All
You're
right.
here to
Well,
rattle.
in furthermore, no, I'm just kidding.
And furthermore, so if someone's listening today, John, and they feel like they're on that gerbil wheel of success, what would you tell them to remember about building a life that truly matters?
I would probably start with my family. And I would say, how can I be a better parent? How can I be a better husband? What am I doing right now that you would really wish I did less of or more of, or stayed the same, but we changed it a little bit? What do I keep doing? What do I stop doing? And how can I make what I am doing better? Ask that question and be very comfortable with accepting any answer that comes and just be grateful you actually got an answer. Because most times they'll just go, "Oh no, everything's just wonderful,"
And nothing's
you
ever
know,
just wonderful.
and nothing's that wonderful. So, unless everybody gets gummies when you get home, daddy gets home, we all get gummies and we have a great time that night, kind of thing. So I would say, and then I would do the same thing with my people. I would do the same thing with my people. If I would own the company, I would start by with talking to leadership, and then I would find 4 or 5 people within the organization to actually make the departments run. Not the people in charge, but, it's kinda like, where's
Soldiers.
that one person that really knows what's going on in this department? That's
Yeah.
the person I wanna talk to. And how can I make this work better? How can I what can we change to make the connections so powerful that people are excited to see other people succeed? Because that's the thing that's important. The success of others, celebrating the success of others is if you have an organization that does that, you have an organization that's tracking, I guarantee you, go back, you have lower turnover than anybody else in your industry. You have less absenteeism, you have higher productivity, more return on your assets than anybody else in your industry because you celebrate the things that are important to them,
Yes.
not just you. People change for their reasons, not because I wrote a really great strategic plan. That's why strategic plans fail, because they're written for the company's improvement, not for the improvement of the individuals implementing the strategic plan. So
That's
I know I say it, it's like, why doesn't this make sense? I don't
It makes
understand that.
total sense. Makes
You
total
know,
sense. Well, let me ask you, we're just about out of time. I wanted to
okay.
say with all those people who are listening to us today, they want to reach you, they want to connect with you. How's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, the simplest thing would just be send me an email. It's just john@johnchapelier.com. Pretty much everything in social media is John Chappelear. So if you want to look up LinkedIn or you want to look up Facebook or YouTube, I've probably got 50 or
You can.
60 videos on YouTube.
And we'll have your
And
email. We'll have it on our
but
show.
my email is the easiest, just john@johnchapelier. And I'm sure that you have the spelling of my name somewhere on this
I do.
on this page.
I
So
do.
that would be the best thing. That's the easiest way for me to connect with people. I don't get anywhere near as much spam in my email as I do in my text messages.
Oh gosh.
I'm not
Yeah.
really sure why,
Have
but I do.
insurance to sell you.
Yes, that's
You know.
exactly right.
Uh,
Boy, do you need I had a guy call me today. "How do you take credit cards?" I'm like, "Do you even look me up before you called?" You know?
I take a credit card. For what? Sure.
For what? I got yes, I have clients, but they're all corporate clients. Nobody pays me with a credit card.
They don't play with a
I get
credit
like,
card. Yeah.
"Yeah, I know, I
So I
know."
have one final question that I ask all
"Yes,
my
ma'am."
guests because we are called Success Through Connections. I believe
"Okay."
everything is through connection. So I wanted to know if you have a story you could share with our listeners about an opportunity that may have presented itself to you because of a connection that you had.
Oh my. Well, I have a friend, but the only 2 things that come to mind, one is a friend who happens to live in the United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can help much with that, but use Susan's book. I
You
can
can
u
use anything you want. It's how
my
you
wife
made it, how
Susan
somebody helped you.
well, somebody helped my book was published by a New York publishing firm, and so they got in there and did all the marketing and submitted it for awards and did all sorts of things, and Susan then spent the next 10 years or so writing Skylar. So she came to me and said, "Could you help me figure out a way to market this?" Because she's not a marketer. And so she is enjoying the marketing skills that I picked up over a frighteningly long period of time and my career continues to expand. But there was someone else. Oh, I know. Donna Deegan is a good friend, and she and a couple of her people asked me about their bookmobile, their mayor's reading program. And I gave them some ideas about ways to encourage the reading and make things more again, just go talk to your readers, ask them what they get excited about, and then do that. It's kind of like the old days with focus groups, in the
Yes.
mirror, and you'd sit behind the mirror and say, "What do you want from this kind of a customer, a company?" And they would answer the questions, and the answer was, "Now just go be that." And so for me, I'm always trying to figure out how I can put people together. I don't go to as many Rotary Club meetings or chamber meetings or those kinds of meetings that I did when I was in my 30s and 40s or even my 50s. But I'm always willing to try and help somebody connect. I had a friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia University who asked me to help spread the word on a new book that he had that wasn't getting much traction. And so I read the book and I did a video of what I thought was really important about the book, got posted, and all of a sudden the book it started connecting with people. So my thinking is, and if nothing else came out of the Daily Six, it would be the value of supporting the people who care enough to ask me for support. I'm just amazingly grateful when somebody thinks, and I apologize, 55 years of keynote speaking will do it to you. I'm just always amazingly grateful when people ask me, "How would you do this?" or "How would you do that?" Or so if you're out there and you have a thought or a question, I mean, you don't have to only reach out if you think you need a coach or a consultant. Call me
You
if you
may
have a
be hearing
question or a
from a few
problem.
people. You may be
That's okay. I'm happy to do that. Grateful for all things at all times, period. If people are calling and asking for questions and help, then there's a level of trust that they're exhibiting in
hearing.
me that says, this guy's worthy to listen to. And for me, that's worth more than
Wow, isn't that
double or triple
yeah.
my salary.
Isn't that
Yeah.
yeah, that's like that's grateful that they recognize you and they value your opinions and your yeah, your ideas.
Yeah. That's really all it's about for me.
That
It's
is. That's awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome.
having that kind of a reputation. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, John. And that is our episode for today. Don't forget, listeners, to subscribe and follow so that you don't miss a single episode of Success Through Connections because we have a new episode every single week. And I'm your host, Zelda Greenberg. In addition to hosting this Success Through Connections podcast, I am a full time realtor and I help people who are going through life transitions by helping them make strategic and clear decisions when it comes to buying or selling a home. So I hope you'll remember that and send them my way. And also, I wanted to remind you that success does not happen in isolation. It happens because of the connections that we have. In today's world, connections, those are today's currency, and that's what makes you successful. So keep making connections. And until next week, I'll see you next week with a new episode of Success Through Connections.